Hi guys, today I'm going to be showing you this subreddit which I've created. I created it a few months ago in April, um, and it's a place to discuss and showcase strange political geography, particularly stuff like strange borders, weird maps, different kinds of flags, and yeah, anything you find unusual when it comes to the field of geopolitics or political geography or borders or international law. So I just wanted to show you it to try and get more people interested, and hopefully you'll check it out. So Territorial Oddities is a place to discuss anything from like enclaves to borders to the geopolitics that's taking place in the world. It's really very broad, and you can discuss anything to do with political geography here. But the real core purpose is weird geopolitics, and by that I mean stuff like enclaves and countries that are kind of in between being a real country and sort of like not recognized by other countries. For example, like Northern Cyprus, or there are a lot of mini microstates, especially in Europe and America, where it's sort of like one person has claimed land, and they really have no legitimacy, but it's still really interesting to see what happens there. And that's the kind of thing I want to see discussed here. So it's extremely broad. Anything you find interesting to do with territory, sovereignty, borders, and just the wider field of political geography, this is the place for it. There's already subreddits to do with borders, trivia and geography, and obviously the wider field of maps and geopolitics. But I think there's a lot of people who are really interested in strange borders and strange geopolitics, sort of the trivia out there. But I'll talk a little bit later about why it's perhaps not as trivial as you might think, stuff like enclaves. Because they're a very underexamined and often misunderstood phenomena in geography and international relations. So you can use this subreddit sort of how you like to discuss that type of thing, to whether it's just posting it very casually, like look at this thing I found on Google Maps, or whether you really want to dive in depth and talk in detail about something you found or something you know about. So we've had some really good posts so far. As you can see, in the first few months, it's been really successful. I think a lot of people have shown an interest. We've reached 1,000 members a few weeks ago. So I'm pleased to see that there are like-minded people who want to see stuff like this, and there's been a lot of other contributors, which is great. So I'll just sort of talk you through some of the posts. That's the general idea of the subreddit already there, and you can go and check it out, and I'll post the link in the description. But if you're interested, I'll go through some of the great posts we've already had. This is how I kicked it off. I posted I was sort of looking on Bing Maps, and in fact, I'll show you. So yeah, I mostly use Google Maps for getting around, but also looking for strange borders. I sometimes like study the lines to see if I can find anything new. But I don't know why, but I was on Bing Maps one day. It's not that bad, but there are a few quirks to it, and this is one I found. It's a place called Castel Gandolfo, which is near Rome and kind of near the Vatican City in Italy. Or not in Italy, if you want to be precise. But yeah, I saw this other line on the map which looked like an international border, as according to the key on Bing Maps, and that's exactly what it is according to Bing Maps. They've drawn an international border around this sort of citadel near this lake in Italy. And I looked into it, and basically this land belongs to the Vatican, and it used to be where the Pope, I think, took his summer holidays. I think the current Pope has chosen not to do that, but Bing clearly thought that equated to sovereignty, and it basically doesn't. But I think, according to the treaty or the agreement with Italy, the Vatican sort of it might be kind of like an embassy, or slightly less authoritative as an embassy. It's perhaps a bit of an in-between space, as you might call it, but legally it's completely Italy. But that was sort of just to kick the subreddit off, and then we immediately got some interest talking about a de facto exclave, I think St. Regis is, on the US-Canada border. And then I sort of went ahead and took the best post that you could ever really put on this subreddit, or the best case study at least, not the best post, but the India-Bangladesh border and the enclaves that used to be dotted around it. That's really like the mother of all territorial oddities. Almost 200 enclaves used to exist there, and as I mentioned, these things can be seen as often pieces of trivia and not much to worry about, sort of things to admire. And that is often the case, but also pretty much just as frequently, these places are very interesting and often very troublesome for the people that live there, and that's the case in India and Bangladesh. So yeah, I've already sort of took the jump and posted about that, but that was 3 months ago now. I'm not opposed at all to somebody posting about it just very generically, or perhaps they want to give more detail or a unique take on it. That's absolutely fine. Once something's been posted, it doesn't mean it can't be documented or posted again. Absolutely not. So yeah, this is a very lesser known case study. Did you know the UK actually has sovereign territory on the island of Cyprus? People think Cyprus is divided in two between the north and the south. I mean, technically it's only divided, well, technically it is divided in two, but you could also see it as divided in three, because you have the de facto state in the north, the Republic of Cyprus, and the UK territories, and there are enclaves of Cyprus inside the UK here, and also a very interesting strip of territory that's only as wide as the road that leads up to a GCHQ station. The territory there is used by the UK for military purposes, but there are people that live there. This is another popular case, the Venbahn, between Belgium and Germany. So I think it's a disused railway line, and somehow it became an international boundary. So as much as Territorial Oddities is a subreddit about strange borders, it's also about the rest of geopolitics, and I think this case here qualifies. French Guiana is a really quite large region of France and the European Union, which is situated on the South American continent. And I was thinking about it, and I'm pretty sure French Guiana is one of the only sort of ex-colonies that still exists on a continental mainland. So there's obviously like the UK territory on Cyprus, but that's not on the Asian or European continental mainland, like Gibraltar is, for example. So that makes French Guiana sort of doubly interesting there. And COVID-19 has been an interesting time to talk about borders, because the lockdowns and the different regulations between countries has sort of made borders a bit more visible in areas, especially places like Bâle, which is arguably the most famous case of enclaves in the world. So this has been one of the most successful posts in the subreddit. They kind of got the title technically a bit wrong here. I didn't realize it at first, but somebody pointed it out. But it doesn't really matter. This is a sort of blip in the border of the UK and Ireland, which is very close to being an enclave or exclave, depending on which way you're looking. So yeah, another type of example is sort of the grey areas and the ambiguities in geopolitics. Uh, and Lake Constance is a good example of where it's not quite certain where the border is, or in fact, it is certain that there is just no border here. In fact, the countries all sort of agreed that they would share sovereignty over this place. And that's quite a rare thing today, because countries, at least in the past, have liked to divide into clearly distinct territories. But as enclaves and other examples show, that often isn't entirely successful. So yeah, this qualifies as strange political geography, but it's perhaps more of the broader border-related post. But I still love to see this kind of thing here, about how a golf course is divided between Finland and Sweden. And you're probably aware that there are loads of videos on YouTube documenting the strangest borders in the world. They're really popular and interesting, and you can share them here. I think some people might think that there's only a finite number of posts or case studies that can be made in this subreddit, because there's only a limited number of enclaves or strange borders in the world. I would only agree with that in part because although there's only a few very famous case studies such as India and Bangladesh, and this sort of panhandle of Namibia here, I actually think the closer you look at the world map, you'll find that there's almost a limitless number of strange cases, because depending on how you look at it, pretty much every border in the world has a quirk or a odd thing about it. So yeah, this is where I went a bit more in depth into the history of a blip in the Latvia-Russia border, and there's some quite interesting history of geopolitics behind it that might challenge the conventional story or narrative you've heard about how Russia dominates Eastern Europe, and perhaps Latvia is sort of pushing back against that using geopolitics. So yeah, Western Sahara is probably the most famous example of a de facto state. In fact, I'm not sure if it would be classed as a de facto state, but it's a large region of the earth that sovereignty is undefined over it. And that's a great kind of thing to post here. Again, COVID-19 sort of showing how a union like the UK can perhaps be a little more clear in terms of its territorial distinctions. Although Boris Johnson has argued that COVID-19 has showed the strength of the union, and I'd see both sides of that argument. And there's also, again, touching back on the idea that there's only a finite number of case studies of territorial oddities, you also have to think about historical examples and even future examples. If you look in the past, there's a lot of enclaves and city-states, for example, cases that would go perfectly here and still do if you talk about them in historical context, such as this one on the Portuguese-Spain border. So I'd love to see more posts like this one that show a very unique take on the case studies and how on the ground things can be interpreted differently by the locals. And this is an example of kind of like border art, as I called it, where the locals have a really unique relationship with the unique territory that they live in. And in fact, they even sort of commemorate it with this mural or map. This post that someone made about a topological map that simplified the world map into only the countries as they border other countries, forgetting the shape and size of countries, was really interesting. And in fact, it's actually kind of useful to examine where the oddities might appear, although this person didn't use enclaves and exclaves in their map. I think that would probably make it a bit too complex, but perhaps theoretically that could be achieved, I don't know. Territorial disputes are also, I think, perfectly fine here. They're strange political geography. In this example, where two countries use maps to stake their territorial claims, was really interesting recently between Nepal and India, where now there's a new discrepancy on the world map. Yeah, this was quite an interesting case I heard about where Monaco was actually at risk of losing its sovereignty to France until 2002. There was a quirk in the royal family lineage in Monaco where sovereignty over the territory might have diverted back to France, or not back to France exactly, but it might have become part of France because the two countries are closely aligned. So go and check that post out if you want to learn more. And this was a really exceptional post that somebody did about Bristol, which definitely proves the idea that there's there's really an extensive array of case studies that you can pick from here. And they discovered something completely on their own about a quirk in the administrative boundaries of Bristol and how that actually overlaps into a different nation with Wales. And then I'll sort of leave it on this last post that I've just done in the last hour, which really sort of turns the tables on the way we might think about enclaves and exclaves. There's this term penne enclave or penne exclave, which somebody coined this term a few decades ago to sort of talk about areas of land that aren't legally in a different territory or aren't legally separated from the rest of a country, but due to the physical landscape such as mountains or rivers or impassable land, they effectively are an exclave of their country. And what this case study here in Croatia does is sort of flips the lid on that and says, well, you can have exclaves that are legally distinct from the rest of their country, but through infrastructure and technology, humans are able to make their enclaves be sort of de facto non-enclaves. They can effectively make their country continuous and contiguous, meaning that all the territory is one in a country and not perforated. So I think that's a really interesting case study, and you will probably get a lot more of that as countries try new ways to sort of eliminate these problems, as they're often called. So yeah, that's Territorial Oddities. Please go ahead and check out the subreddit, have a look and see if there's anything you want to contribute. And please let me know your thoughts on this subreddit. I'm completely open to ideas about how it can be improved or changed, whether it's something about the fundamental ideas behind the subreddit and what kind of topics it should cater to, or if it's something a little more just about the background or the design. If you have some suggestions there, it would be really great to hear them. So thanks for watching, guys, and please go and check it out.